What's up, guys? Four-wheeler Doctor back again. This morning we're going to be working on one that might not even get her hands dirty. This is a 2021 Honda Foreman 520 Rubicon. Got some big 33s on it with some 20-inch rims, independent rear suspension. This is the FM6 model, so it has power steering and foot shift, which is probably about the most reliable one they make. People have problems with the electric shift on them, DCTs, just a whole different engine. So what we're going to do on this one today is install a gear reduction. This thing is pretty new, like 100 miles on it, but the owners are ready to go ahead and start upgrading a little more. So we're going to do a 60% gear reduction in it. This is one of Reduction Boss's reductions. I've done a few of these in the past. Haven't done one on a 520. The bottom end is about the same, or is the same as a 500 or the 420 for that matter. Just got a bigger cylinder in it. But don't know if anything else is different. Like I said, I hadn't even took one of these bikes apart yet, a brand new one. Just once over, it doesn't really look any different. So, but anyway, I've installed one of these reductions in a 304 tracks as well as a 420 Rancher. The 420 was a 40%, 300 was a 60. This one here is a 60% Reduction Boss machining there. And this is what comes with your reduction when you get it. When you get into these big reductions, I like to replace the clutch springs in there to keep our clutch plates from slipping, and also kind of try to halfway lay out some tools that I'm going to need. I'm not sure if this is a full comprehensive list of everything you need, but it's everything I could think about at the time, and I'm not really thinking of anything else right off the top of my head here. So I'll kind of run through what we got and what we're going to use it for, and then we'll jump on tearing this thing apart. Alright, so got an impact. You don't have to have one. You can do it by hand, but I'm trying to do this quick, so that's what we're going to run with. 1/2-inch impact, pretty strong one. Got a 14 millimeter 6-point. Got a 6-inch extension here with a little bobble head on it. That really helps to get the bolts out of the front differential. So that's what I use that for. Another little 14, that's still for the bolts on the differential. 12 for that front bracket on your differential. A 27, that's for, I'm pretty sure it's a 27 or either a 24, but I'm thinking 27 for your clutch nut. You have to take the clutches off. 5 millimeter Allen. This is to get your Allen head bolts off of your plastics. We got a deep well 17. You don't have to have a deep well, but that's to drain the oil out. That's going to be the first thing we're going to do. Air ratchet, which makes a whole lot easier getting all the bolts out of that front cover, because we got to take those off. Hang on just a second. Alright guys, sorry about that. Little boy's ready to go eat breakfast. Alright, so air ratchet, this helps to get that front cover off. There's probably 15 bolts or so, 13 bolts on that front cover. I'm gonna see if I can find a piece of the cardboard with the holes in it, but I don't see that. I'll show that to you later. So get the front cover off with that. The 2-jaw puller, just to pull the centrifugal clutch off. You really don't have to have that. Some people just tap them off with a hammer. That 2-jaw makes it pretty easy. And I've got these little snazzy pliers here. I honestly don't know what these are for, but they work real good for pulling those little rivets out. I think somebody gave me these, something in the maybe auto body industry. I don't know, they don't have a name on them. They got 80 stamped on them. I don't even know what that means. And then I also use these here. These are actually like nail brad removers. You can pick these up at Home Depot. They work great for the little plastic pieces. Okay, and my cordless impact, naturally use it for everything. 10 millimeter socket on there. I believe all the bolts on that front cover are 10s. So that's all I can think about right now. May actually need a 14mm wrench and a 12mm wrench to get that front differential out. What we got to do, we don't have to take it completely out, just slide it forward to get the drive shaft out so we can get the front cover off. Okay, so like I said, the first thing we're going to do is drain the oil out and start taking some of this plastic off. This plastic on the top end here, I don't think it's any different than the old models, where you just pop the pieces out, pop one clip out here, and then just lift up on it. This is some kind of fancy plastic. But yeah, that's how it works. Pop it up, lift that whole piece out. We're going to pull the floorboards off. All these push pins here. That's where one place you're going to need that Allen head. 10mm here to get the floorboards off, and we'll go ahead and pull those out to get them out of the way. And same thing on this right side. Same setup. You've got Allen heads in both of these locations. One spot back from the edge. Pull the plastic off of it. Drain the oil, and I'll cut the camera back on once I get the plastic and all this stuff off. I'm just going to stick this stuff in a bag, and then we'll jump to the next part. Alright, cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, got all the plastic off the thing now. It wasn't too bad. A couple little hidden snaps. You got one push pin here. You can't really see it until you pull the center plastics off. And then there's a push pin up under here, kind of up by the fuel tank, and then one down here on the bottom. Those are both the same on both sides. So make sure you get those off as well. Alright, so I got the oil draining out, as you can see down there. Next thing we're going to do is drain the coolant out of this thing. So we got to pull this front cover off, and the water pump runs through here, so it'll make a mess if you don't do that. Well, this one is very clean, so you can actually see the copper washer on this bottom 10mm bolt. That's your drain bolt. This usually makes a mess, but the best way I've found to get this out is take this little one of these little bendy funnels. Let me grab one real quick to show you. A funnel like this. You can just pick these up at Walmart and stretch out, and get you a jug. I'm gonna reuse this stuff because, like I said, it ain't got but 100 hours on it. I'm gonna get my other funnel because this is the one I actually use for oil. But put it on here like this, because this antifreeze, will come out of here like a spigot. So you need something to catch it and then something to drain it into. So I usually get like just a block of wood to sit the gallon antifreeze jug on, and then break this thing open, and it'll leak out a little bit, and most of the times it'll kind of vapor lock. So then what you have to do is reach up to the top and crack your radiator cap, and that will open up the floodgates and be ready to catch it then. It may drop a few drops in the floor, or it might drop a half gallon if you're not good. But this is the easiest way I've found to do it. Otherwise, there's not a real good way to get it out of there. So drain that coolant out, and then we'll start taking some bolts off of this thing to see if we can get it apart. Alright guys, we got the coolant drained out of this. I actually still got the funnel rigged up here, catching a little bit, dripping out. Go ahead and loosen up this radiator hose that come off your water pump here. Might want to have your funnel handy, because sometimes some coolant will pour out of it. See if we got any. Nope, none there. Just fold that thing up under the bottom there, up out of the way. Also want to remove this one here just has a like a pinched type clamp on this small coolant hose that runs to the bottom of your thermostat. Go ahead and pull that off too, because we'll need to leave all this together, pull all this out, and leave that little hose attached there. Okay, I think the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and loosen up all these bolts, or remove all these bolts around this cover, and then we will jump on sliding the front diff forward. So let me get 10mm on my air ratchet, and we'll pull these things out. The front case, you can't, then my board's pretty wore out here, but you can see we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, like 16 bolts hold that front cover on. So you got to get all those out, and you want to get you a piece of cardboard like this to stick them in. A few of them are different lengths, and it just makes it a lot easier to put the thing back together when you have your bolts in order. So let me get all those pulled out, and then I'll cut the camera back on right before I start taking the diff out. Alright guys, I got all the bolts out of the front cover here. Now we're going to start taking the bolts out of this differential to slide it forward. First bolt we're going to take out is this one here. It's right in front of where the lower control arm meets. Some of the earlier models didn't have a nut on the back side, but these newer ones have a nut back here. I actually already got my ratchet in here, but there's a nut right here on the other side, and it's tough to get a wrench in there to hold it. So what I usually do is just put a ratchet on it with a deep well, and it will hold it most of the time. If you had somebody else here to hold it for you, it would make it a lot easier. And then also use my 1/2" drive impact with a 6" extension and a 14mm socket. Let's see if this works. More than likely it's probably not, just because I got it on camera, so give it a shot. I don't know if it broke it loose or not, or if my ratchet just came off, but it could go either way at this point. No, ratchet came off, it came about halfway off, but anyway, you get the gist of it. So that's the first bolt you take out. Let me get it all the way out, and I'll cut the camera back on this second one. Alright guys, the other bolts we got to take out are on this front bracket. There are 12mm bolts that bolt into the frame, and then a 14mm bolt that goes through the diff. I usually just used a air ratchet with a 12 on it. We'll get in here on that 12mm bolt, and then go to the other side and do that one. Then that same 6" extension on the impact will get the other bolt out. We'll get all those out. I'll cut the camera back on and show you show me sliding the differential forward. Alright guys, got the bolts out of the diff, and the way I normally do this, just take a small crowbar and lift up on this differential a little bit. You have to kind of get it up out of the little bracket down there at the bottom, and push forward on your drive shaft here. You can see it slides forward pretty easy, and it comes off. So I'm off here at the engine, so now you just slide this boot back on your differential like that, and you can slide the whole shaft off. There you go. Yours might be a little bit tougher than that, because yours has probably got more than 100 miles on it. So just work it with a crowbar. Sometimes you have to kick the crowbar in here and pry the very end of the shaft to get it to slide out, and it'll also push the whole diff forward. But that's all you have to do. And now you can get this front cover off and get to the internals of the engine to replace that gear reduction. The next thing, the second thing you want to do while you got it like this is go ahead and pull this O-ring. There's an O-ring right here on this output shaft. Go ahead and roll that off there. I usually just try to stick it with my shaft here, because when you pull this cover off, that O-ring can get hung on that seal and mess your seal up. So go ahead and pull the O-ring off, and then now it's just a matter of tapping this cover off. There's a couple pry points, one on the top here, one on the other side. I got just a flat screwdriver and a small hammer. This just has a seal with some RTV on it, so it's usually not too bad to pop off. So catch that screwdriver on that tab. You can see the cover already coming off like that. Once it breaks loose, comes off that first little bit, you can just pull it right off with your hand. Getting hung just a little bit. Let me go check and see what is hung on the other side. I'm not sure what it's hung on. Let me come on off. The shift arm fell down in there. That's not a big deal. This piece here, so don't worry about that. We'll stick that back on there when we put it all back together. But I'll pull the cover off, try to pull it out. I'm not gonna be able to get it out this side. With the power steering, it takes up a little bit of room in there, so it won't come out this side. We're gonna have to go out the other side with it. I'll walk over there just so you can see it come out. Alright, so the cover comes out like this. Pretty easy. There is an O-ring right here that needs to go back on here where the oil pump. Let me move this cover so that you can see it. Where the oil pump has a dowel that sticks out here, so stick that O-ring back on there. There's also a larger O-ring on that bottom dowel, and then there is another O-ring here at the top. This should stay with the crankcase right there. I'm sorry you couldn't see it with the camera, but it slides back in this top groove here on the top, and that's where your water goes through. Also an O-ring on this little dowel here. We're not gonna mess with that. So got that out. As you can see, this thing's real clean because it's only got 100 miles on it. So I'll clean up this mating surface here with some Scotch-Brite, and we'll get ready to put some RTV back on it. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull that clutch off, and we'll get started with the internal stuff to get the gear reduction on. Let me grab my 27mm socket, and I will go over here and go ahead and pull these that shift linkage that fell off. Go ahead and pull that off just so you can see. So you take it out like this, and there's a bearing on the inside. It comes out, as well as a little holder. You need to take all that stuff out, and we'll be reinstalling that, but not right now. Also, this bottom arm here that sticks up, it will slide off of a shaft down here at the bottom. So you'll need to slide that off in order to get the change clutch off, just like that. The thing normally has a washer on it. Let me see if the washer's on the inside. No, it doesn't have a washer. So this model here doesn't have one on that shift shaft. So hang on to that. Let me get my socket, and we'll get these big nuts off of the clutches and get those pulled off. I'll cut the camera back on in a sec. Alright guys, so I got the 27mm on there. This thing is regular thread, so put it in reverse on your impact. Get it lined up on your socket, on your nut, and run it off there. Well, I thought I run it off. Just like that. There we go. There's our nut. And then I think I'm gonna have to pull that clutch off before I can get the secondary, the nut off the secondary. And what I do with these, they don't have very much tension on them at all, but I'll stick my 2-jaw puller on here and just put a little tension on it and pull this thing off. My 2-jaw is a little bit warped up, so it will, you can kind of rock it side to side and get that thing to come off of there. My center bolt is way too long. Let me back it up a little bit. Goodness gracious, let me cut the camera off. I'll get this thing set in there and then I'll cut it back. Goodness gracious guys, these things are normally just pop right off here with the wiggling the 2-jaw around, but this one here is super tight. So I'm actually having to tighten this 2-jaw up to get it to come off of there. And it's coming. See, and that's usually the way it happens. It just pops right off. It's not really pressed on there, it's just kind of bound on there with the splines. So pull that off. It also has a washer in there. Hang on to it. And then this other one, same deal. Change clutch, 27mm. Hitting my air line. Camera with the air line. Spin this around. Hold on to your clutch basket. Comes off just like that. And these bolts or nuts are actually staked on there, but usually when you run them off like that, it just pulls the stake right off. You just have to restake them when you go back in. I am going to replace them with new ones because this is a new bike. Okay, so with the change clutch, all you do is just slide it right off. Make sure you have that little bush in there. It does have a washer. Hang on to it too. We'll set this over here on the cart because we're going to have to change the springs out on it. And then the last remaining piece is this gear here off the crankshaft. It's got a washer in there. Make sure you get that. And that's pretty much it on the removal of the factory stuff. So now we need to change the springs out and put this new stuff back in there. I am going to clean up around the inside here, get all the oil out, and clean around it with some brake cleaner just to get all this old gasket off so we can get ready to put the new one on. So I'll cut the camera back on in a second. We'll change the springs out in the clutch. Alright guys, here's just a comparison to the reduction to the factory stuff. This is factory on this side. You can tell the difference in the gear sizes here. And the way Jeremy does these things, I mean, they're identical to factory. Used to, they would TIG weld these gears on there and all that, and they weren't quite as strong, but they still work pretty good. But this thing here is just like factory. Splines good. The gears are all, it looks good. He does a good job on this stuff. And then on these, they end up drilling these rivets out and replacing this gear here. So you can see this one's much smaller than this one. And they, instead of riveting it back together, end up using bolts that are tapped into here, have Loctite on them and all that. So they're good to go. So alright, that's the comparison between the two. What we're going to do now is pull these clutch discs out of this one. They just slide right back into here. I am going to just pull it right up like this. There's also a washer under there that you need to pull out. This washer here, it goes back in our gear reduction. When you slide these things back in, slide all your clutch discs back in your slots there, just like that. And so this one's done. I'm actually going to send that back to Jeremy for a core. And we're going to remove these 10mm bolts out of here for the spring replacement. And we'll just going to kind of work my way around here. Really, those two don't have any tension on them because the other ones are still tight. These are the ones that matter. So ease those out. Ease it out. Ease it out, just like that. Pick that piece up. Now we're just going to pull these springs out. These are longer, I know. Look like they're a little bit bigger in diameter too, so they've got to be stronger. So put those, replace all four of those. Take those factory ones have some kind of blue paint on them. So now we're going to stick this one back together. Yeah, you can tell they've obviously got more tension on them because you actually have to kind of push down on them to get them to get the bolt to start. So put a little tension on your plate there. There you go. We'll get all of them started in there. There we go. Alright, and then we're just going to tighten them down a little bit at a time, work our way around. This plate, if you happen to lay it down, I just did mine right here at the same time, but some of you might not be able to. It's got out stamped on it. You know, make sure that faces toward the outside of the motor. Toward the out of the motor. So let me cut the camera back on. Alright guys, so now just torque these bolts down. These are the same size as our normal 10mm headed bolts, at least the shanks are on them. So I'm going to go with our normal, like what is this, 10 Newton meters, or it's like 7 foot-pounds or something like that. That's what we got it torqued down to. Okay, so like I said before, you don't put your washer back in here as it was from the factory, but you do want to make sure you get your bushing back in here. It slides back in, kind of like that. I got it going in there crooked. There it goes. You get it straight, it'll slide right in. Alright, so now this is ready to go back on. We're going to go ahead and I'll cut the camera back on in just a sec, but I'll go ahead and slide these things back on there and we'll get them tightened back up. Alright guys, we're ready to put this reduction back on. First gear we need to put in there is this one here, the crankshaft gear. Slides on. Remember to leave that washer out of there. Alright, next one you need will be your change clutch gears. It don't look like something's in here right. I think I'm gonna have to pull this back apart because these change clutches aren't right. They should have pressure on them. This undoubtedly something's not meshed together here with our pressure plate, because they shouldn't have slack in them. So let me pull this back apart and figure out what's wrong with it. I actually have had a number of people ask me about this in the past, so I'm about to show you how to fix it. So hang on just a second. Alright guys, I'm going to start pulling this thing apart. I don't know if there's such a thing as having a rash of questions about these clutches. Put this washer back with the clutch basket. But here recently I have had a rash of questions about them. People are replacing these clutch discs and putting them back together and they still slip. Well, it's very seldom that I replace these because most of the time they don't wear out on the ATVs. But I'm going to show you what's going on here. This one here, as you can see, there's slack in the clutch disc. There's actually a gap in there. You're not supposed to have that. So I'm going to pull these clutch springs off and see what's going on. Undoubtedly something got twisted sideways when we unbolted it a while ago. So pull this pressure plate off here, and it appears what happens, if you can see down in there, these teeth don't line up with that very bottom set of teeth. So this pressure plate wasn't sitting all the way down in there. So if we rotate our clutch disc around just a hair, put our pressure plate back on, kind of wiggle it as it goes down, look at there, no gap. These discs, I'm squeezing them together, but they won't move. So that's what a lot of people are doing. When you put these things back together, you must have that tight, or it will slip and just won't work. I guess when we pull this off, it must have cocked out a little bit, and then when we tighten it back up, it didn't get lined up just right. So I'm going to put this thing back together and we will stick it back in the basket. But I just wanted to show the problem with that and what it seems like a lot of people are running into here lately. So stick this back together. Alright guys, ready to stick this thing back in here. First thing you want to stick on is the gear reduction on the crankshaft. Slide that on there. Don't push it all the way on, because you're actually going to have to slide both the clutch basket and that gear on kind of at the same time. The clutch basket got the clutch disc in there. Make sure you get your little bushing in the back side. Also, you want to look down in this hole and make sure that that little washer that's in there is not blocking any of your splines. You can see all the splines in there, because sometimes that'll make them where they won't slide on there so easy. Sometimes they're not really easy to slide on anyway. I've got it in neutral, so the shaft tries to spin on you. That makes it a little tougher. If you just keep rotating it, you'll get the teeth lined up around this crankshaft gear, and then eventually you'll get your teeth lined up on your transmission gear. That one actually went together pretty easy. So see, it slips right on there. Your crankshaft gear's lined up and everything looks good. So now you want to stick the washer back in here in the center, and your nut, get it started by hand. These things are fine threads. You definitely don't want to cross thread them, because you'll have a mess on your hands. Alright, so I'm not 100% sure what the torque spec is on that. It's not the easiest thing to torque down if you were going to torque it. I'm just going to hit it with this impact pretty good bit. Let me see if I can do this without the compressor cutting on. Man, that was a rough ride, wasn't it? There, the airline kept hitting the camera. Alright, so got it tightened on there pretty well. It still tries to spin. You kind of got to hold it with your hand. Hold it with one hand and hit the impact with the other. So make sure you stake that bolt once you get it in there, and just look for, spin it around till you see the flat spot on that transmission gear, and then that's where you want to take a punch and just bend that nut down to keep it from coming back off. I'm gonna probably have to cut the camera on because I think my head needs to be right here where the camera is so I can see it. So let me cut the camera back on. I mean, cut it off. I'll stake that thing, and actually I could probably go ahead and stick the clutches on there, the centrifugal clutches. Like I said, this thing's brand new, so that's what a brand new clutch drum looks like. Sometimes they'll be purple and real black, and that really is a pretty good indicator as to how the bike's been ridden. Slides right on there just like that. Stick your washer on and your new nut. Get it started by hand as well. I do it about the same torque spec. Just hit it pretty hard with the impact and then stake it as well. So let me get that one tightened up, and I'm going to stake both of these nuts, and I'll cut the camera back on right before I put this shifter linkage stuff back in. Alright guys, we got those nuts on there staked down. Now we need to put this shifter stuff back on. First thing you need to put on, mine stayed together, is this collar and bearing goes inside of the change clutch there. It's pretty tight tolerance, so you got to get it pretty square, and I pull the bearing out all at the same time. So if you push it in square, it'll slide right in there, kind of like that. Alright, and then the next part to go on will be this little arm here. When you slide it on, it has a spline that it has to line up on this shift shaft, or shift shaft. So just wiggle it around till you find it. This is where patience comes in handy. And then the other little arm of this thing goes in that green spring that's in there. I'm assuming yours will be green. I think they're all usually some color like that. Alright, and then this piece goes on. This end of it goes inside your bearing here in the middle of the change clutch, and that's it. And guys, I don't know if many of you know how this works, but I've actually thought about this a good little bit, and whoever came up with this clutch setup, or the way it changes gears, was freaking brilliant. So I'll give you a rundown of how this works. If you don't care, or if you don't care, if you do, stay tuned for a second. If you don't, skip ahead about, I don't know, 20-30 seconds, and I'll be jumping on putting the cover on this thing. Alright guys, so the way this thing works, on most motorcycles, as well as usually the sport quads, they have a set of clutches on them, and you control it manually with the handlebars. So you squeeze the clutch lever in, it engages, or let me say disengages the clutches here so that you can shift gears. Well, as you know, in this case with the utility four-wheeler, they don't do that. You don't have it manually, or you don't have a handle to pull. So what happens here is when you shift this shift lever with your foot, there's 3 balls in this clutch cover here, right here. They fit inside of these little grooves here, and as you shift this thing, you can see that this arm here will move. It starts to move, and it rides up on those 3 balls and pushes in on this clutch, and whatever you call it, disengages or engages, whichever way, it knocks it into neutral. for a split second, and then it shifts gears. It ain't gonna shift gear that way because we're going down to neutral, but let's go into first here. It's so the clutch would be engaged right there, then it would shift gear. Then as you let off, it eases the clutch engagement back out to go into gear. That's why pretty seamless is when you shift gears. It's, you know, goes to first, goes to second, goes to third. It shifts right through them very easily because it actually is applying the clutches as you pull the shifter up, all at the same time. And this clutch here, what it does is it just engages when you start to pull off. As your RPMs come up, this can be in gear, but this one does not engage until your RPMs start up and it slings these weights out, then it starts pulling. So that's how your clutches work. Like I say, if you didn't care, I hope you skipped ahead about this point. If you do, that's how they go. So I know you've probably seen folks before hold up on the shifter, and what they're doing is actually engaging the clutch. Hold up on the shifter and then drop it down to make it pop a wheelie or whatever. The hold up on the shifter, that engages the clutch. That's just like holding the clutch lever in on a street bike or a racing ATV. And then when you let it down, it drops that clutch and then it starts pulling because you normally have it revved up, and that's what makes it snatch. When you, I wouldn't recommend that, but it'll tear some stuff up. But that's how it works. That's why it works, I guess you could say. So there you go, little educational excerpt here for a I guess this would be called a automatic clutch or something or other like that. Anyway, pretty smart dude that come up with this, whoever it was. Alright, now got all that on there. I'm gonna clean this mating surface up real good. Clean the oil out the bottom because I don't want any of that to get on the RTV. Put a little layer of RTV on this front cover and then we'll slide it on. I'll cut the camera back on right before I put it on. Alright guys, I got a thin layer of RTV smeared around the cover here. I like to just kind of dab some on there and then take your finger and smear it out. It only takes just a little bit of RTV around there to seal this thing up, and it also looks a lot better if you don't have it all gobbed up on there. I'm going to take the camera around to the other side to show you a few things you need to check before you put this thing back on there. Kind of got a bunch of stuff crammed in here in the shop right now, so you have to bear with me. Okay, just a couple things, and everything of it is over here on this side that you'll be concerned with of getting lined up. You need to make sure you have there's an O-ring on this little dowel. There's also an O-ring that goes through this water outlet, an O-ring down here on your oil pump, small dowel and an O-ring there, and then a larger dowel and an O-ring right below it. That's pretty much everything you need to look for. Make sure you got all that stuff in there before you install this cover back in. And I'm going to try to stick it back in there. Hopefully everything will be lined up pretty good. The only real alignment issue that you could potentially have here is that water pump shaft here lining up with that pin in your cam. I just kind of eyeball it before I stick it on there, and if it's not lined up, it pretty much won't go. So it'll tell you pretty quick if you got it close or not. So let me see here. Feels kind of like something's hitting over on the other side. I don't believe it's her. Let me go over there and check the other side out. Alright, over here on the left side now, it appears that it's the O-ring or the seal for that output shaft there is kind of hanging on the shaft a little bit. And that's what's keeping it from sliding all the way on there. See, it's all the way on now. just like that. Seal flipped out a little bit on me there, so got it back in now. Just barely, the edge of it was popped out. So now got it pushed all the way up against there. So I'm gonna get all the bolts and stick those in all the way around and torque those down to our 7 Newton meters or whatever it is, 9 foot-pounds or whatever it is, and hook our coolant hose up to the top here. And then I'll cut the camera back on right before I put this drive shaft in, just to show you how it goes in there. So I'll cut the camera back on once I got all these bolts in. Alright guys, I got all the bolts tightened up in there and I did torque them down. I know you really don't have to torque these, but what I like to do, sometimes you'll get one or two that might not be tightened up all the way, or just a little bit loose once the whole cover seats up on there right. So I just like to check it just so I make sure I don't have any loose bolts anywhere. I also went ahead and stuck this coolant hose on the bottom of the thermostat here and slid the clamp up on it. Now we're going to stick the front drive shaft in there. Need to put your O-ring back on your output shaft of your motor there. Slide it up over the splines onto the groove, and then your drive shaft, stick it in the front first, push it back, move this camera up just a little bit so I can get in there and get a little grip on it. You're going to have to push this thing forward and may have to, just like that. About to say, may have to slide your boot up. This boot here is kind of messed up on the drive shaft going to the front diff. It's, I think I'm going to have to slide that diff back some. Well, no, I got it to go up on there. Slide that diff back some to get it to go on there like it's supposed to, because the diff is not far enough back as it should be. So, alright guys, last thing you need to do is get your differential lined up here to get your bolts back in. This shaft's not far from being lined up there, and your bolts, I'm about a half a bolt hole off, just happen to slide back that far. What I like to do is just stick a crowbar, a small crowbar up at the very front of this, and pry back on it just a little bit where that front bracket goes, and that'll get you enough back till your bolt hole lines up. I'm very close right there. I'm trying to line up this bottom bolt hole here. So just do that. Stick your bottom bolt in, your front bolt, and your bracket, and then those two bolts that hold the bracket down here and here, 12 millimeters. And that'll be it. Put your plastics back on, oil in it, and that's all she wrote. I've still got to do a few other things to this bike. I'm gonna put some arch stay arms on it and do a radiator relocate. So I'm not going to have a finished product video, but I may actually do one on the radiator relocate, because people probably hadn't seen those on a brand new one yet. So I guess that's, well, I'll tell you what I do. I will cut the camera back on and let you know how it pulls these big tires, at least just riding it around out here. See what difference I think seat of the pants it feels like. So I'll cut the camera back on when I get everything back together and let you know how it feels.